Sailing time. From tiny gale-whipped Portugal Cove, Canada says au revoir to her royal visitors as they board the ferry boat bound for the Empress of Scotland. This is the homely end of a triumphal tour. It all began 5 weeks before at Dorval Airport, Montreal, where the BOAC Stratocruiser Canopus landed them, and Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh received Canada's welcome from the Governor-General, Field-Marshal Alexander, and Premier St. Laurent. Because their trip had been postponed through the King's illness, the royal couple had flown to make up time instead of going by ship to Quebec. From now on, whenever Princess Elizabeth flew, she was in the care of the Royal Canadian Air Force, who mounted the Guard of Honor for her first royal salute on Canadian soil. Now it was farewell to Montreal for the time being, to begin the tour at its scheduled start, Quebec. But at the airport siding, a crowd has been standing for hours in a drenching rainstorm waiting for this first close look at the princess and her husband. As they walk toward the 10-coach royal train, the royal couple get their first heartwarming welcome from the Canadian people. Men, women, and children. And speaking of women, Barbara, suppose you offer the feminine point of view.
The royal tour really begins in the heart of French Canada, in the historic old fortified city of Quebec, down narrow cobbled streets. That mother and child, those cheering crowds. Everybody wished the princess bonne santé, for French is the language of this city. Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip drove to the Plains of Abraham, hundreds of feet above the river. This is where General Wolfe fought the French General Montcalm to win the city of Quebec and Canada. And here, on this historic battleground, the princess reviews French-Canadian soldiers who distinguished themselves in the last war. So we come to Ottawa, Canada's capital city. While they were here, the royal couple stayed at Rideau Hall, the home of the Governor-General, Viscount Alexander, who welcomed them. They drove to Parliament Hill to see the Houses of Parliament and the Peace Tower. And then, while in Ottawa, on behalf of a group of Canadian club women, Princess Elizabeth presented Queen Mary's carpet to Canada. And I'm sure this must have been a mission dear to the heart of the princess. The carpet had been sold in Canada to raise dollars for Britain.
You have asked me to hand into the keeping of the National Gallery the embroidered carpet, which my grandmother, Queen Mary, has made with her own hand, and which is lasting evidence of her unrivaled skill and artistry. I am very pleased that the carpet is to find its home here in Ottawa, because I know that you will value it not only as a work of art, but also as a personal link with my father's house. It is therefore with great pleasure, Mr. Massey, that I hand it into your keeping.
Toronto now, in a Royal Canadian Air Force plane. Everyone in Canada asked to see the royal couple, and Canadians are spread out over an awful lot of ground. Elizabeth and Philip covered most of it. The R.C.A.F. made the off-the-route visits possible, so let's take a quick look at the show they put on for the princess. Niagara was a must at the princess's special request. And just for the record, I've never met anyone who was disappointed in his first view of the falls. They do say some couples come back to Niagara for a second honeymoon because they missed the falls the first time. At At Windsor, Detroit, across the American border, joined in the welcome to Princess Elizabeth and the Duke. And thousands of Americans crossed this river for the day. Later, in Windsor's Jackson Park, hundreds of Canadian brownies had their own special close-up. When they expect a cold spell in Winnipeg, brother, they get it. So overnight, they built a plastic hood for the royal car. The idea was to let people see if they could get near enough. A stop to visit the Manitoba Legislative Building. In case you don't know, each province is self-governing within the Dominion. That's why there are so many of these big buildings to visit. And if you think you're seeing a lot of Mounties, wait till we get to Regina. It's the headquarters town for the R.C.A.F, who always get their man. But today they've just got horses. The Cubs turned out, too, to give the princess a big hand. And I'll bet she got just as big a kick out of their cheery grin.